So, mindfulness and happiness. Is there a connection? The short answer, of course, is yes. They are intimately connected. They are intimately connected whether you are interested in something that is deeply spiritual or you just want to do it light and fluffy. Either way, it's really important. When we consider happiness, unfortunately, we don't think about things very deeply. We have this tendency to just react and to go along and to do things and not actually think about it. For instance, happiness. Happiness is basically of two types or two varieties. One type of happiness is what I will describe just broadly as spiritual happiness. And the other category is, I will simply describe it as worldly happiness. There's a little problem with worldly happiness. The problem is because it has a beginning, it also has an end. It never lasts very long. True or not? Or somebody's found some secret that we don't know about. It doesn't last. And it can't last because that is the nature of this world. The nature of this world is that everything is impermanent. So all of the experiences that we will have in this life and in this world are also impermanent. They come and they go. And even though everything is impermanent and passing, we yearn for something that doesn't end. How do all the kids' stories and fairy tales and the love stories, how do they all end? What's the last line in the book? And they lived happily ever after. Well, where exactly does that happen? It's quite funny, but it's also a little bit sad. We have this desire, we have this aspiration for permanent or perpetual happiness, but in seeking the experience in this world, it always falls short. Even the most wonderful things leave you with, this hope or aspiration for something more. Well, there's something also quite extraordinary. And as I mentioned earlier, we tend not to be very thoughtful about topics even like happiness. It's kind of a little bit silly, actually. I mean, we're really chasing after happiness. We want to be happy. But we don't really think about it very much. I mean, if we were really extraordinarily intelligent, and that doesn't mean like a big brain and university degrees, it can be just a common, ordinary person. But we would have that perception. Everything has a beginning. Anything that does have a beginning also has an end. And there is this nature of things in the world, these dualities. Happiness is the opposite side of the coin to sadness. They are inseparable. If you are experiencing one of these things in this world, you will have also the experience of the flip side. Is this too serious or not? We're okay? Okay. I'm the bummer guy. I'm here to serve out large dollops of truth. In the hope, of course, that, we will benefit from this. And I'll just add, anything that I'm going to speak to you about, it's not something I've pulled out of the air or some other dark place. I grew up not far from here in Te Aroa, and I left New Zealand when I was about 18. I was desperately looking for some answers. What is this all for? What's it all about? Well, I ended up in India for a couple of years or more, living as a monk there, and this really wonderful journey of spiritual exploration, and which has actually become this is my life. Everything else, this is the foundation for it. Everything else is sort of attached to that. And so I feel I've been extremely fortunate, and anything that I'm going to pass on to you is things that I have come to understand, and I have heard from my spiritual teachers, and from a deep and vast well of knowledge known as the Vedas. The Vedas are a timeless collection of spiritual texts that provide amazing insights into life, into happiness, into death, into eternality, into the nature of the soul, everything that we actually need to know to become happy. Getting back to happiness now after that little introduction. If we think, what is it that makes me happy? And I think as you get a little bit older in life, you've been down the road a little bit, you become a little bit more hesitant to answer that, because it's quite it's something quite difficult, when you think about it, it's quite difficult to answer. So, with most younger people, for instance, or when we were younger, when you ask, what makes you happy, well, someone might say, well, a particular piece of music. I mean, when I hear this, it's like my hair stands on it. I just love the sound. It's just wonderful. Okay, well, let's tie you to a chair and put some headphones on, and let's listen to that music continuously for the next 48 hours. I can ask, what's your favorite food? What do you find, it really gets you, you just feel so good about eating. Same kind of thing, put you in a room, that's all you're going to eat for the next week, 3 times a day. And it doesn't matter what, and I'm going to use the term sensual or sensuous experience, meaning it involves the use of the different senses, seeing, smelling, touching, tasting. It doesn't matter which one of these types of activity that you find some pleasure or happiness in. When you repeatedly do it, the result is it's a bummer. And it's like, what's with that? That just doesn't make sense. If somebody gives me like $1, okay, I've got $1. Somebody gives me another dollar, now I've got 2. The more I get, the bigger this gets. But in this case, it's the opposite. The things that you find most thrilling and wonderful in this world, when you're constantly exposed to it, it becomes boring, and then after a while becomes like torture. If you just keep at it long enough, everything will give you that experience. You think or not? Or does anyone have a different opinion? This is the nature of things. So they've come up with this brilliant idea. Variety is the spice of life. You have to keep mixing it up so it won't turn into a bummer. That's okay. That's okay. If you want to, that's what you want your life to be, and that's where you want to find your happiness. Even then, the idea of being able to become more able to use these techniques associated with mindfulness will still bring you a much better quality of life. What is mindfulness, and what is its purpose? What is it for? It's actually a really deep subject. It doesn't mean it's complicated, but it's actually a very deep subject because it deals with something that we never think about. We just absolutely never think. There's a couple of things that are really ever present in our life and we almost never think of. The first one has to do with the question, who am I? Who am I? You know, when you ask most people this question, they'll, you ask them, just note down on a piece of paper who you are. They will give you a list of descriptions of their body. I am a male or female. I am of this ethnic extraction. I am this tall. I weigh this much. My hair is like this. My complexion is like this. My eyes are this color. You will get a whole list of who you are. And the astonishing thing is, at the time of death, when you leave that body behind, that list is still there with the entire description on it. And you look in the coffin, it's exactly the same. It's okay, no panic. That person's still here. I've got their list of who they said they were, and it's still here. But we know that that person is gone. And while this may seem, when we first hear this, it's like, why are we talking about this? This is a little strange. Does it really have any significance? You know, it has a huge ramification on the search for happiness. If I don't have a very clear understanding of who I am, if I cannot separate my true spiritual needs from the desires that might be in my mind and arise from my body, I will not be able to experience complete peacefulness, true happiness in this life. What do you think? It's a little on the heavy side, isn't it? But it's okay. It's all right. Don't worry. The other thing is the mind. We have this strange relationship with our mind. You notice what I just said? We have a strange relationship with our mind. We often don't understand what our mind is and what is the nature of the relationship with me, because I don't even know who I am. So how can I know that, right? But we find ourselves at a point in time. Yesterday I was in Thames and talking to a group there. And I said, we've found ourselves at this place in time that cannot actually be compared to anything that has happened to humanity in who knows how long. I read this startling thing in the New Zealand Herald. 1 in 20 young people, that means 25 and under, 1 in 20 people, young people in New Zealand, will either contemplate or attempt suicide in a year. That evokes in me an incredible sadness. An incredible sadness that what have we come to? What has happened to us that people are so desperately sad and desperately lonely that they will do one of the most extraordinary things a person could do, and that is to take or attempt to take one's own life. And the reason that they would do this is because of a feeling of alienation, a feeling of sadness, deep sadness. To be in such a deep and dark place and think that there is no possibility of getting out. Do you think this is a shocking statistic? 1 in 20? So why are we in this state? How has this happened? And it has happened because we have strayed very far from what used to be known as wisdom. It used to be, up until about 50 or 60 years ago, that people thought that qualities of temperance and to be not overly vulgar, not overly loud, a sense of duty and responsibility, a sense of family, being part of something bigger. Now everybody is, in spite of what they might try to convince you through social media, that we've become more social, we've become incredibly antisocial. We say and do things through these medium that people would not do face to face. There's all of these studies now that when a person's feeling of envy and emptiness is directly proportionate to the amount of time they spend on social media looking at other people's profiles, thinking that everybody else has a wonderful and perfect life, and everybody's trying so hard to project this image of perfection and happiness, and their life is so wonderful. I have a friend in Hawaii, and she had a long-time friend who asked if she could come and stay with her for a couple of weeks, and she said, "Yeah, sure, very welcome." So she came out, and before she arrived, the woman I knew looked her up on her Facebook, and it's just like this person is just, her life is a festival. It's just an explosion of color and sounds and food and visiting places and experiences. And it's just like, oh my God, her life's like a Mardi Gras. And then she comes out to stay with her and pretty much locks herself in her room for 2 weeks. And on some days couldn't even get out of bed. She felt so profoundly disturbed, and she was in a state of very profound depression. And it's like, what's going on? What's happening? You know, previously it's not really that people had such deep spiritual insight, but they had adopted from their parents and grandparents, from our society for hundreds of years, an idea of how people should live and how we need to be moderate. We need to be modest. We need to be temperate in our living. And for this, people actually experience not a great deal of positive happiness, but they are way less agitated. They are way less likely to experience depression. You know, there's all of these promises. We live in this extraordinary experiment called consumer economics that began, you know, in the early part of the 1900s. This amazing experiment where we are now, and it was broadcast, the President of the United States in about 1940, thereabouts, he made some statement that there is this new discovery that a citizen's primary responsibility to society is to be a consumer. Because consumptionism, it fuels the economy, it creates opportunity, it creates more money, which creates a better situation for everyone. And through this, your life will become happier. This was the general message. And this has been not just embraced, people have just taken this on board as absolute truth. Absolute truth. The result of this massive experiment, we are seeing it already, and unfortunately it will tragically become much worse. Because from a spiritual perspective, this road, when you go down this road, it never ends well. It can't end well. There is an inherent conflict. The conflict is this: you are a spiritual being. This body that you have on is only a temporary thing that you are using. It is not who you are, in spite of the fact that everybody is telling you that this is who you are. And in spite of the fact that you feel so driven to put on your best face, the reality is you experience that this is not you. This is not you. And if you commit your life to the pursuit of happiness and fulfillment solely in relation to this body and this mind that you have, you cannot experience anything other than disappointment. Told you I was the bummer guy. What is really needed in everyone's life is a true spiritual awakening, where it goes beyond just ideas, but we come to actually experience our real identity, who we actually are. We come to learn that this desire for happiness, the desire to love and be loved, these are things that arise from the very soul itself. They are spiritual needs. And unless we seek a spiritual experience, then we will never be fulfilled. We will never find the love that we seek. We will never experience the love that we seek. We will never experience the profound happiness that is actually available to each one of us. But we have to know where to look. Mindfulness. Because we are unaware of our spiritual identity, there is this incredible tendency to identify with the body. The mind is this thing that leads us around. Now, in the yoga philosophy and the spiritual sciences, they speak about the living being, if we can use the word soul or spirit soul. In Sanskrit, it's a much nicer word. It's called Atma. This word Atma, it means the self. The self, who you actually are. The self is covered by two types of material covering. One is very obvious. It's this body that I have on and that I'm using. But there is also a subtle body that covers you, the living being. And one of the most influential parts of the subtle body is the mind. And in all yoga sciences and teachings, all yoga paths, a really critical part of that is to learn how to exercise some control over your mind. And the reason that you can control your mind is because you are separate from it. It's your mind. I changed my mind. Don't we say that? But we don't even think what that means. Okay, you changed your mind. Who are you? I don't know. But you know that you changed your mind. Or you can you struggle to bring your mind into focus. What happens is, though, if the mind is like actually a bit of a monster. And if you feed it, if you give it control over you, it will lead you into the deepest, darkest, horrible place where you will be capable of almost anything. Any person is practically capable of almost anything. And I'm not talking about good things, I'm talking about bad things. If they allow themselves to be just controlled by their mind. You know, we're doing this wonderful meditation class we've got going in the maximum security prison up in Auckland at Palermo. And I'm asking these guys, how did you end up here? We're talking people that have been engaged in violent crime and, really heavy stuff. These are people doing long time. How did you end up here? And of course, the easy answer is, I did this or I did that. But the deeper question is, why? Why did you do that? Why did you do that? That we don't often think about. You know, in the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the ancient Vedic texts, a great yoga scripture, it describes that the unbridled mind can be your greatest enemy. More than anything or anyone else, your own mind can become your greatest enemy. A person that commits suicide is the most, glaring example of how your own mind can be your greatest enemy. When a person becomes overwhelmed by depression, when a person becomes overwhelmed by anger, and in anger they speak words that are so painful, or they inflict violence, verbal or physical, when somebody rapes someone, when somebody commits any form of horrific violence on another, it is for the reason, from a spiritual perspective, it is for the reason that a person has become so overwhelmed by what's going on in their mind, they have lost the ability to step back and say, I don't have to follow my mind. I don't have to follow its dictates. I can choose to step away from this. So I was talking to them about these things, and it's really a heavy experience. I mean, these guys are just like, people that have had, a lot of them, horrific lives. They've been exposed to violence as children. A lot of them, they've lived in association with other people that are really, violent and just this kind of life. And so they have come to think there's no other way. There's no way out. And when you speak to them about, it is actually within your capacity to step back from your mind. In stepping back from your mind and not being totally controlled by it, totally going along with anything that's in there, is already an incredible application of mindfulness. And this can become a foundation for true spiritual growth. So, for common people, it's really important to teach people and to teach them from the very young. I'm not a big fan of what's going on in the world. I'm going to get into trouble now. I'm not a big fan in all of these ideas of, how society should be and how children should be raised, how you can just let people think they are the center of the world and pamper them and give them anything and not let them face any hardship and they're going to turn out okay. I'm sorry, that's not true. That's garbage. Am I going to get into trouble here? No. It's kind of good. Kiwis are pretty down to earth, or at least a lot of them, although I can see New Zealand has also been very influenced by a lot of these ideas that are just so pervasive in Europe and America, with this idea that you become more enlightened by becoming more animal-like. I was mentioning yesterday in Thames, you look at Nike. I mean, this is the epitome of where the world is going. Their logo and their statement underneath it is, just do it. The message is, do not exercise restraint, Don't think about things logically. Don't try to reason with anything. If there is an urge there, just do it. I think that's shocking. I think that message stinks. I think that this is really harmful for any human being to cultivate these type of ideas and notions. But this is where things are going. This is how we are being influenced by society. This is how we are being influenced through advertising. These are the messages. Just go for it. You can do anything. You can be anything. No, you can't. I'm sorry, you can't. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But what it does is it leads people to contemplate and become filled with desire. Desire for this and desire for that, and then to impulsively act on every desire that comes up. And I'm sorry, according to ancient wisdom, this is not the formula for happiness. It is not the formula for peace. It is the formula for tremendous disturbance and heartache and pain and suffering. Whew. Not sure I should have been here today. I'll read you a verse. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, and which is ever being filled and always still, such a person alone can achieve peace, and not the person who strives to satisfy all desires. And you know, there's a scientific reason for this. The reason is, it doesn't matter how much you stimulate your body. It doesn't matter how much you stimulate your senses, how much you drive your body into a frenzy of ecstasy or whatever. At the end of it, you always feel empty. And you feel empty because the body is not you. You are a spiritual being residing within. And simply by stimulating the body into a frenzy cannot make you fulfilled or even happy. And whatever happiness that you derive from simply stimulating the senses and the body, it will have a beginning and it will have an end, and it will not fulfill you. And if you think that this is the object and purpose of life, if this is your object and purpose, I'm sorry, this will not end well. This will be disappointing. Mindfulness is really important because it makes it so before we act on something, we think about it. You know, they have this saying, look before you leap. You know, we've got all these old sayings that have been around for hundreds of years. People have thought about this. People have gone through this. There is wisdom attached to this, but we don't see the relevance in our life. And so we try something and it fails. And then we try again and it fails. And then we listen to this song from way back, maybe this time, you know. And it's like we don't grow a brain, we don't learn from our experiences, and we don't start looking for some alternative where we can actually find truth, where we can find shelter, where we can find peace, where we can find true spiritual understanding and awakening, and come to experience our actual heart's desire. So the practical application is day to day, whether it's the negative things or even the so-called positive things. Don't just follow your mind. Hit the pause button before you erupt. Somebody does something to harass you. Somebody really upsets you. Before you react, hit the pause button. Take a walk. Do some deep breathing. Count to 100. Do some meditation. Oh, now we're talking. Something that will really make a difference. Get yourself on an even keel. When you are going to make decisions about how you are going to deal with someone, how you are going to react to someone, how you are going to deal with a situation, you should do it when you're on an even keel. You know, what's hilarious is marriage. Marriage is just like really hilarious. My wife's sitting in the back looking at me. No. We're on the same page. You know, what's the most common thing in relationships and marriage? Fighting, right? Somebody does something that we don't like, or they have done something that we don't like, and then something down the road, something's going to happen, and we're going to object, and then things are going to escalate into a fight situation. And when we're all passionate and angry and distressed, then we're going to say things, well, what about that time that you did? Now you want to start discussing it. It's like, what is that? Now you're going to discuss it? When everybody's lost control, when they've lost control of their own mind and their ability to just, look at things calmly and dispassionately, it's just like so stupid. And we do it. We do it because we have not thought about and attempted to learn the importance of mindfulness. And the fact that we should not be being swept away by our mind and desires and things, just reacting all the time. So, learning to step back, to not just engage, whether it's on the basis of a personal desire or something someone's done to me or my reaction to something, is like really important. Learning to exercise some control, at least, of your mind, and consider, is this really going to make my life better? If I get angry, if I respond, if I say something, is this really going to make my life better? Of course it won't. It will make everything worse. Then why do it? I couldn't control myself. No, that's not entirely true. You never thought about trying to control yourself. So, this is a really big subject, and we don't have enough time to really do it justice. But what I'd like to encourage you all is to make some commitment towards having a better life. And that commitment will come in the form of seeking better understanding. But not just better understanding, to be able to grow spiritually, to find that safe haven, that place that we desire. It will come from engaging primarily in meditation. Meditation is not simply stilling the mind or not trying to think about anything. Real meditation means taking your mind and submerging it in that which is spiritual. Allowing your mind to be bathed in that which is transcendental. And it will have an incredible purifying effect upon the heart and upon the mind. And without any extraneous effort or endeavor, over time, it will change you. It will change you in that you will begin to be able to increasingly appreciate your own spiritual identity. This is the beginning of this path of the quest of who am I. I'm really astonished with this, the program that we're doing in the prison. These hardcore guys, and the first time we did the introduction, to them, people are kind of testing the water and they're throwing out things and they're being tough guys and everything. But after like 6 weeks of this program, people are now coming in and they are bringing gifts from their own rations. They set up a little thing for us there with biscuits and tea and stuff there. And they say they want to show their appreciation. And all these big, tough, tattooed guys are sitting there like little boys. And it's so touching, because they're in this environment where they don't have much choice. Their whole day is controlled. And they're really thinking deeply about, how did I get here? What am I going to do when I get out? And when I talk to them about, the need to have an actual purpose in life, and how they were just shocked thinking about, what is my purpose? All of this happens as a result of engaging in this meditation process. The easiest form of meditation is to take spiritual sound. It's called mantra, spiritual sound. Actually, this word mantra is very interesting. It's made up of 2 parts, mana, which indicates or speaks to the mind. And this tra means to draw away. Literally, it means, there's other meanings, but it literally means to draw away. In other words, to be able to not just become enslaved by one's mind and passions and be on that ride wherever it's going. That we learn to step back and consider our personal welfare. So spiritual sound or mantra has this effect. And by doing it, did we have a nice experience earlier with the Gauranga breathing and chanting? It's wonderful. To build a personal practice, this is called sadhana. To build a regular personal practice of activity that's going to be transformative, that's going to change me, is really important. So maybe I'll just see if anybody's got any question. And if not, or after that, we will do a little bit more chanting. I'll lead you in one of these mantra meditations. It's so simple, even little kids can do it. Okay, Anybody have a question?
Can I just ask you, when you say, like, with the mind, and you step behind the mind, and mind can run away with you, that is what a lot of people call your ego, isn't it?
Actually, in now we're getting all technical.
But
No, it's fine.
No, but then I'm not saying in the sense of ego, oh, look at me.
Yeah, no.
But, you know.
Yeah. Well, the word ego was actually, the way the Greeks understood it is different than the way Freud used it. Freud used it in a certain way which sort of like captured the mind of the Western world now, and it's sort of understood in a certain way. In Sanskrit, they have this word ahankara, which it relates to ahang, I am. If I say I am, and then I add a description there, and that is anything other than my true spiritual identity, it means I have become controlled by this false idea, this false concept of who I am. So we refer to it in English as a false ego. There is a true ego. It is my true spiritual identity. But when I say I am hungry, I'm not hungry, my body's hungry. I am a man, no I'm not. That's my body. Or I'm a woman, I'm a child, I'm fat, I'm thin, I'm old, I'm tired. When I add any of those things, that's actually related to my body or my mental existence, that's not my true spiritual identity. This is the ego or the false ego. And it is very corrupting, and is responsible for all of our choices and how we act and everything, unless we choose to try and act in a spiritual direction, on a spiritual path. Okay? Yes?
How would you answer the question, who are you?
Who am I?
Yeah, in a true way.
This is a big subject, a wonderful subject. Briefly, if you want to know the truth of anything, you must seek what is its essence, meaning what is it actually made of, what is its essence, what is its position in relation to everything else, and what is its natural function. If I understand these three aspects of that question, then I understand it in full. I am an eternal spiritual being, temporarily trapped within this body, and am thinking that I am a material being, I'm a human being. I'm not, I'm a spiritual being. My position is that I am not supreme. I'm not. I would like to think that I am, and there are many philosophies promoting it. And this actually gets people a little bit excited, because there is this pervasive philosophy that's infiltrated the Western world and the thinking since about the 60s. And it's founded on actually a philosophy that came out of India that's quite ancient, where I see myself as supreme and all there is, and it's all about me, and that's not real, and that's not true. The mere fact that I am covered by this material body, I'm clouded in ignorance, I've forgotten who I really am, are all indications of the reality that I'm not supreme. And I do have a natural function. The things that will actually make it so I can begin to taste true happiness in this world is if I serve and to experience love. This begins to arouse in me something that I feel is really important and I want, unfortunately, particularly in the case of love, as it is experienced in this world, it falls short of the ideal. But it gives us a little taste for something that is actually eternally part of our nature. So I've just given you a little tiny explanation of a very profound spiritual reality. Yes?
I'm just interested in the word trapped in the body. It sounds like it's not, it's as if we're in prison.
Yeah. You desire to be eternal. And that is why people are so disturbed by death. If we encounter a dead body, it is shocking and it is frightening. There's this hilarious thing somebody showed me on YouTube. They were doing some pranks in South America and they got this elevator. It's actually doesn't work. And so people would go in and go to press the floor they want to go to, and somebody would say, hold, and they'd bring in a casket into the elevator and prop it up against the wall. And the people are just like, you could instantly see their reaction to death. That the normal reaction is to be like, and then, somebody runs out and they say, just a minute, but then the doors close and then the elevator's moving and people are freaked out, and then part of the coffin opens and this body, what's meant to be a body with cotton wool up the nose, falls out over the heart, and people just scream and go crazy. The reason we have this type of reaction is because it is so against the truth that I am eternal. And when I'm absolutely lost in this idea that this body is me, then I see death as something incredibly disturbing, incredibly frightening. I probably shouldn't have just thrown that word out, trapped. I don't mean trapped in the sense of against my will. I am a willing participant in what is going on, but trapped in the sense that if I am identifying with this as me, then it makes it so I cannot experience the most incredible happiness, an unbelievable ocean of love that is my inherent right, that is truly part of who I am and in my heart of hearts, what I truly desire. So you don't have to, I'll kind of reel that one in a little bit. But if we actually explore, the yoga texts are just amazing, just limitless oceans of knowledge. And they talk about how this is going on, how the living being has been affected by these different experiences, what it leads to, and your conclusion from understanding these things, you would probably think, yeah, maybe trapped's okay. But it's not like an unwillingness. We have made choices. That's a big subject, but we have made choices. And what's important and why mindfulness is important, from this point in my life onwards, the choices that I will make and the actions that I will take are going to determine my future. My future is in my own hands. And that is why coming to these understandings, engaging in these spiritual processes are really important. And learning to exercise control. Don't do things that are going to make your life worse. Don't do things that are going to further bind you and tie you to the material experience. What we need and desire is the spiritual awakening. Okay? Good with that? Wow. Thank you very, very much for taking the time out, and of course to my hosts who invited me here. And feel very fortunate to be able to share a little of the great treasures that I have received. So I'll ask you to join with me. We'll do a really simple mantra. And you don't have to sit in any special way. You don't have to breathe in any special way. You can just hang loose. It's all good. The mantra is only 2 words. One of them repeated twice. It is called Om Hari Om. This word Om, it represents the highest truth, the absolute truth, or you can even say God. Hari means the remover of great obstacles, the remover of things that bind us to this world. And a wonderful understanding can be also to have one's heart stolen. Hari, one who takes away. But this is these transcendental sounds, they don't originate in this world. And they are passed to us by a long lineage of spiritual teachers, and therefore they have great spiritual potency. So I will sing it a couple of times, and I'll ask you to join, and then I will lead in the singing again, and you will repeat. This is called Kirtan, and this meditation, Kirtan meditation, is one of the most simple ways of bringing about spiritual enlightenment.